Welcome to another exciting episode of Logan Holmes Watches. I want you to put your seats back and your tray tables in their upright position because this week we are flying the wacky skies. That's right, we are taking a look at the 1980s comedy Airplane. Hello again. I am Logan Holmes, and I want to thank you for tuning in to Logan Holmes Watches, where each week I look at some of our favorite films and I talk about some of the lesser known facts that you hopefully may or may not know about. Anyway, this week I'm looking at the 1980s film Airplane, which in other parts of the world is known as Flying High. Now, in case you aren't familiar with this movie, and shame on you because it's pretty much the funniest comedy ever made, it is a 1980 American parody film, and it was written and directed by David and Jerry Zucker and Jim Abrams. And it stars Robert Hayes, Julie Hagerty, and it features the likes of Leslie Nielsen, Robert Stack, Lloyd Bridges, Peter Graves, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Cast is ridiculous. Anyway, it's a parody of disaster movies, particularly those that take place in the air. More specifically, it is a parody of a 1957 film called 0 Hour. And actually, it was so close to the plot. Well, I mean, it was the inspiration for the movie. Let's face it. The Zuckers even admitted that. Anyway, they were so worried about being sued that they actually bought the rights to the movie 0 Hour from the writer Arthur Haley for $2,500. So the basic premise of the movie is it is about ex-fighter pilot Ted Stryker, who is a traumatized war veteran, and at the film's beginning we find out he has taken a job as a taxi driver. And his wartime girlfriend, Elaine, breaks up with him, and she's a flight attendant. So at the very beginning of the movie, Ted is seen pulling up to the airport, and he wants to get on the plane that she's working to win her back. Hijinks ensue, people get food poisoning, and this very reluctant hero has to take control of the plane and land it. Again, like I said, it's one of the funniest movies ever made. I almost feel somewhat ridiculous trying to summarize it because I can't imagine that there are too many people out there listening that are not at least somewhat familiar with this movie. But enough wasting time, let's get on to those little known facts. As I mentioned, the movie had 3 directors, the Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams. Problem is, at the time, the Directors Guild of America ruled that only Abrams could be credited for directing the movie. So what happened is the Zucker brothers had to work out of a trailer and radio in their instructions to, I guess, Zucker or PAs so that they could still participate in the film. So serious were they that a DGA, or Directors Guild of America representative, was on set to make sure that only Jerry Zucker spoke with the actors. Eventually, a DGA executive board, did give in and allow all 3 of them to share director's credit on the film. Now, as previously mentioned, you had actors such as Leslie Nielsen, Peter Graves, Robert Stack, and Lloyd Bridges were all hired for the role. Now, you might be thinking, if you're familiar with any of those actors, before they did Airplane, they were known as very serious actors. But the directors hired them because they wanted the characters in the movie to play the roles straight. At no time do any of the characters in the movie think they're in a comedy movie. And that deadpan delivery is what they wanted, because quite frankly, it just made the role funnier, particularly Leslie Nielsen, was just amazing. It's incredible to think that he had never done comedy up until this point, and subsequently would have a very successful career doing comedy, particularly the Naked Gun movies with the Zuckers, and what also, I know he would do at least one movie with Mel Brooks, Dracula Dead and Loving It. Yeah, it's amazing to see that this is where it started. Speaking of Leslie Nielsen, how can I put this delicately? He had a lot of fun on the set, as in fact, apparently he purchased and he sold little flatulence devices, aka little machines that make passing gas sounds, and he sold them for apparently $7 a piece on set to various cast and crew members. And boy, did they have a lot of fun. Apparently, this delayed production quite a bit because they kept using the machines during scenes, such as when Leslie Nielsen's character asks Robert Hayes' character, "Can you land this plane?" Apparently, Nielsen used the machine every other word, which caused Hayes to have a lot of problems with keeping a straight face. Now, I should probably mention that both the Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams first kind of met and knew each other through college when they were part of a comedy troupe called Kentucky Fried Theater. As a matter of fact, I believe the first movie that they released, even though they had completed the script for Airplane, was the movie Kentucky Fried Movie, based on their comedy troupe act. Another member of that troupe was an actor named Steven Stucker, who played the character of Johnny in Airplane. And he was my favorite character by far, because, I mean, just an insane, absolutely strange performance, to say the least. If you are familiar with the movie, you know exactly who I'm talking about, and you are probably laughing hysterically just thinking about it. Well, anyway, that actor, he came up with all his own lines for the role. Now, initially, the original rough cut of the film was 115 minutes long, but after screening the movie to various college campuses, and apparently 2 theaters, the film was cut down to 88 minutes. Now, here are some interesting possible casting choices. Both David Letterman and Sigourney Weaver had auditioned for the leads, but of course those parts went to Robert Hayes and Julie Haggerty. And both Dom DeLuise and Christopher Lee were approached to play the doctor role that eventually went to Leslie Nielsen. Apparently, the studio even recommended that Barry Manilow play the lead Ted Stryker, which personally I have a little trouble seeing. Also, baseball player Pete Rose was originally supposed to play the role of Roger Murdoch. Of course, that part went to basketball superstar Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. His agent actually demanded $5,000 over his salary of $30,000 because apparently Kareem wanted to buy a nice rug, and apparently he did. Rose was unavailable due to his baseball schedule. Now, Peter Graves, who, for me personally, I'm mostly familiar with him as the voice of Biography. He originally thought the Airplane script was tasteless trash. Thankfully, he came around to it. Apparently, he didn't care much for some of the more adult humor, but I guess eventually he saw the humor in it. And in case you're wondering, the child actor who played Joey, who was 9 at the time, in that infamous cockpit scene where Peter Graves' character is asking him all sorts of highly inappropriate questions, well, that actor was named Rossi Harris, and he did not know, or at least he did not understand, what Graves was asking him. Now, later on in his life, he saw the movie, and it finally dawned on him. But thankfully, he didn't, because I'm sure that would have probably created a lot of very uncomfortable questions for him to ask his parents. Also, no surprise, Airplane, when it was released, was an immediate box office smash, and it only took 2 days for it to earn back its entire production budget. In fact, the film was so successful that it was the highest ever grossing comedy until the arrival of Ghostbusters in 1984. Also, and this is kind of understandable, the one market that was not interested in showing Airplane was the airline market. In fact, the only airline that showed Airplane as an in-flight movie was Aeromexico. I guess they had a sense of humor. Now, while the film is filled with iconic, funny lines, actually it's probably one of the most quotable movies ever made, the one that usually stands out in most people's minds is the conversation between the doctor and Ted Stryker once they find out that the pilots are sick and they need someone to fly the plane.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
That line has become so iconic that it was placed as number 79 on the American Film Institute's list of 100 best movie lines. Interestingly enough, that line actually saved the movie. Let me explain. You see, the Zuckers and Abram were novice filmmakers, and the studio Paramount was reluctant to have them head such a large production, and they only gave them a 2-week trial period. So when they aired that line, they filmed that scene on the first day, and when they aired it, or when they played it for the studio, they were so impressed with it that they finally grasped the concept and humor of the movie and liked it so much that they left them alone and allowed them to continue production. Also, there was a 1982 sequel, but the directors of the original movie wanted nothing to do with it because they felt that they had exhausted every possible disaster movie gag that they could have. Instead, the sequel was directed by Ken Finkelman. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And while several of the original film's cast did return, the movie only grossed $27.2 million at the box office. And actually, movie reviewer Robert Ebert gave the film 2 out of 4 stars, saying that it never really seems to know whether it's about a spaceship. It's all sight gags, one-liners, puns, funny signs, and scatological cross-reference. It's kind of hard to explain. It's funny. I think it's funny. If it wasn't a sequel and it didn't have to live up to the original, I would think that it probably would have been better received. Apparently that's the general consensus if it stood on its own. But when it's compared to the original, don't get me wrong, it's funny, but it's nowhere near as funny as the original. It also doesn't help that it reuses a lot of the same jokes. So you certainly have that been there, done that. Actually been there, done that even better feeling. Still, it's funny. Check it out. William Shatner at his wackiest. Can't go wrong there. Sadly to report, while many of the film's stars continued or went on to have successful careers, the same cannot be said for the lovable, inflatable co-pilot Otto, who currently resides in Jerry Zucker's garage, deflated and decaying. So I guess Hollywood can be a cruel place. Anyway, folks, that wraps up pretty much my look at Airplane. I hope you enjoyed it. If you had any comments or want to add anything that I may have missed, you can contact me by email and this is all one word, The Real Logan Holmes, that's Holmes with an L, that's TheRealLoganHolmes @gmail.com. And now, as always, I thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know, either way. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Logan Holmes Watches exclusively on Radio Care.